So before we begin this delightful conversation, I want to make a plug for all of you leaders out there who are very likely struggling with overwhelm in your life. We have so many ambitions and responsibilities in our roles as leaders, but we often fail to be able to even address the most important work that needs to be done just due to the sheer volume or the mismanagement of it. So it's for this reason that I've decided to give away for free the entire self-management module of the Clearing Obstacles Roadmap. Now, the full roadmap itself is the comprehensive set of tools that I use with all of my clients to help them in our coaching journey, but it always starts every time with the self-work or self-management specifically. I'm deeply committed to helping you get traction in your life so you can crush those frustrations of overwhelm that are holding you back from the success that you're living for. All 11 lessons stand on their own, but together they delve into solutions that extend far beyond mere productivity tools. So go to bestself.coach/free to get started today. I want you to have your own self-management operating system to help you clear the obstacles that are in your way. Can't wait to see you there.
The more that I've taken the eyes off myself, the more I've taken the eyes off the result, the more I've focused on process, the business, and just the daily workout of the things that I know that are good for me, the richer my life gets.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships that I have, the people I'm with, the businesses operate themselves. I don't have to worry about that. It's getting eyes off of me. That's the secret.
Welcome to Season 2 of Clearing Obstacles, the podcast for leaders and those that want to be, because no organization, not even yours, can thrive without effective leadership. Now, as you master this skill, it will become the superpower that gains the love and respect of your team, the freedom you seek in your life and business, and ultimately, the success of your vision. I'm your host and coach, Dan Kent, with Best Self Coaching, and in Season 2, we're bringing you the voices of thought leaders who have a unique and valuable perspective to share on how to reimagine and redefine leadership in our world today. We'll be diving into topics of vision and authority and accountability, management, culture, vulnerability, self-awareness, and much more, because they all fall on the shoulders of today's leaders. Are you one of those exceptional people? Well, you can be. Our guests all have extensive theoretical and philosophical depth that's also matched by their experience in the practical application of those principles. And we think you're going to agree. So, all of you emerging and evolving leaders, buckle up as we clear the obstacles to help you get there from here. So today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to someone who's a former client, a dear friend, and someone who exemplifies what a true success story looks like. Tom Pepple is an entrepreneur through and through. He has been through the rigors of developing several small businesses in a way that I personally admire and would hold out as an example of how it's done. Now, we'll let him share some of the specifics in this spirited conversation, but let me just say that over the years, I've learned at least as much from him as he may have gleaned during our coaching time together. He is a remarkable father, devoted husband, an airplane pilot, an avid golfer, an intimidating skier, I can attest to, and just a damn good human. As president of Retail Profit System in Oregon's Rogue Valley, and a co-owner of Big Rig Glass in Portland, Oregon, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a very dear friend and a wise sage on the subject of leadership, Tom Pepple. Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with me today. We are doing this live and in person, which I don't normally have the pleasure of doing. They're usually Zoom calls with somebody far away, but today we get to do this just up close and personal and over a barley pop. That's the vernacular I'd use for what we're consuming today. So I missed a few things there in specifics, so maybe just set us up a little bit. Where are you now? What got you here, Tom?
The classic entrepreneur, as Michael Gerber described it, as the entrepreneurial seizure, and one day having to have this great idea that I could do it better on my own.
Yep.
Was aptly applies to my journey as from salesman to small business owner. And I didn't really learn the meaning of entrepreneur until later. I just thought everybody thought grandeur thoughts and there's something better out there. And it kind of surprised me that, and it was a moment of humility as well to understand that people don't always think the way I think.
People don't always think the way you think. We're going to jump right in here. What do you mean by that?
Opportunity. Not everybody wants to accept the responsibility for opportunity.
Mm.
And I think a key to leadership is recognizing where people are at in their journey and then presenting them the best chance that I have of getting them to move into themselves or into a new space. By that, I mean, fear holds people back. I had a business coach that once told me that I have an entrepreneurial mindset. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you see the best in every opportunity and every human being. And I said, yes, I do.
For better or worse.
Yeah. And so, recognizing that not everyone is comfortable in that step is again, it's a moment of humility for me to recognize that not everybody has that. At the same time, it's what I want to share with them. I want them to recognize what's the word I'm looking for, Dan?
Their own magnificence.
Yeah, their own
potential.
Yeah, thank you. Let's do that one again. Not everyone recognizes their own potential. And I think as a leader, my gift to them is to encourage that. Whether they take it or not is up to them, but it's up to me to offer it up.
How has that in the years served you, and how has it backfired? We'll spare the names to protect the innocent. Yes. But what are some success stories and maybe horror stories that you've?
Well, I think for me, absolutely, it goes both ways on that. So having been in my current company, Retail Profit Systems, has been in business for 26 years. And
what do you do? I'm going to interrupt you real quick. What was Retail Profit Systems? Just briefly.
We do ATM machines, credit card processing. Those are our two main things that we do at Retail Profit Systems. So in the 26 years that I've been in business, I just retired my first employee. Had been with me for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I've got one kid who's my favorite story. He came to work for me when he was 18 years old. He worked for me for a couple of years, met a beautiful young woman. He said, I have to get a better job. So he went and took a union job driving a dump truck for a couple of years. He put his wife through school. She's now a teacher. And he came back to me and said, hey, can I have my old job back? And Jared's been with me for about 14 years.
Yeah. What brought him back?
That's a question for Jared. I don't know the answer to that, but I would I would think it'd be the culture, the care. I think it was a very stark comparison to a small company who deals with people on a consistent basis versus a transactional company, literally driving a dump truck, where it was put your 8 hours in and go home. I mean, I think if I were to take a stab at what Jared thought, I think that would be what he would think. Yeah. I've got another technician who's been with me for 13 years. I've got my newest employee's been with me for 5 years. So those are
that's your newest employee.
Yeah, my newest employee. So those are the things that, I'm super proud of, is that we build a place where maybe I'm getting better at picking people, or maybe I'm getting better at retaining them.
You're doing something right. I mean, that is one of the things that I've always been so struck by, is the longevity of your team. And, I had the benefit of kind of working on site there with you and them. And I know the guys you're talking about, and I'm far be it for me to speak for them, but what I could tell you is what I directly observed. And it's that they are given, like you said right at the top of the conversation, they're given ample opportunity and support and resources to succeed, not just in their role, but in their endeavors for their life. A tagline, if you will, for Best Self Coaching is that your business should serve your life as an entrepreneur. And I think you extend that out, and I saw over the years, you extend that out to your team. Their position, their role, their contribution to the company should also serve their life. And you've gone to great lengths to make sure that it does.
Yeah, we have that. I have that conversation openly.
Yeah.
That this job should serve your life. And if this job isn't serving your life and you're staying here to do me some favors, you're not doing me any favors.
It's definitely not yourself either.
Yeah, and know yourself, because then you're going to be resentful or unhappy, and you're going to walk in my office one day and quit. If we have an open conversation about what I can do for you to make this place where you want to come to work, then it's a win-win for both of us.
100%. And our customers.
can't forget the customers. I mean, that's really what we want to serve is that relationship.
Yeah.
So here's how I describe it to my guys when we have this conversation. I say, my job is to create the space for you, albeit a circle or a square or a rectangle. I said, this is your space. I want you to own that space.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing you want from me is coming in your space.
Right.
Right. So that's that dichotomy between delegation and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If you maintain the responsibility of that space, then you and I are going to get along great.
Right.
But if there's anything, my commitment to you is if there's anything that you need within that space to manage that space, it's my obligation to provide it to you. And that could be resources or tools or training or education or, when you were with us, the consultations that you had one-on-ones with my employees.
Yeah.
And to make them better at what they do.
Yeah.
Gives them confidence in who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives the business forward. And also how you do something is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if they show up more capable or more responsible, or they're going to go home and be better husbands and parents and friends and family and sons and daughters and all the above.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've involved your family to some degree. I mean, and I know to be transparent about it, not to put a hyperbolic edge to it, but I know your team to a large degree, you kind of consider your extended family, but your proper family also has been involved over the years. Has that ever generated an added complication as a business owner?
Yeah. So a funny story on this one. My wife, Kim, does the books, and she came to work with a bad attitude one day. And I said, hey, why don't you go home?
Just straight up. Love you, baby. See you tonight.
Yeah. And she didn't come back for 2 years. So she says she quit. I say she got fired, but it depends who you ask. No. And then I finally encouraged her to come back because it was important for me that my wife be involved with the complications of running the business and really seeing under the hood what happens on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to be a critic on the outside.
Sure.
Yeah. So for her to be involved was twofold. Number one is to show her, how things really, really work. And number two is I needed her help. And there's certain things in a business that are super trustworthy, and you want the best people possible there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's an interesting razor that you have to walk with family. And you're not the first nor the last client I've ever worked with, and just speaking in that context, that had family involved. And those additional complications require, I think, an extra level of nuance and skill and devotion to certain disciplines of leadership because like, ironically, sometimes our absolute worst employees or team members can sometimes be family. Why do you think that is? Your family accepted, of course.
Well, yeah. So one of the things I made really clear to Kim, my beautiful wife of 35 years, when she came back to work, was that she doesn't work for me. She works for Alex or Dave or whoever. She doesn't work for me. She works for the org chart. She's part of the accounting department. She reports to the controller, not the president.
Okay.
So that was one thing that was really important for us to establish right away is lines of boundaries and lines of communication and lines of org charts. So I think that was important. I think the other thing is that when I speak to her as the president of the company. I have a concern about this, or I have a question about that. Not as her husband.
You can compartmentalize that.
In that respect. And so, and it actually comes in pretty handy because when you're at home, you can say, as your husband, I'm deeply concerned about this or this or this. Something you couldn't say to a non-family employee.
Sure.
But although I use it with my employees, I can pull an employee in my office. I can say, hey, as your boss, but I'm going to put that aside. As your friend, I see this and I just want to check in with you. How are you doing? How are you okay? Or what's going on in your life? And more often than not, that results in some pretty deep conversations that sometimes it's nothing, sometimes it is.
Yeah. Have you ever encountered any quicksand when you get to that level of I guess, emotional intimacy with your employees?
I've learned to set personal boundaries with myself. Rule number one, I don't lend money.
Okay.
Right? I found that out the hard way that I just don't. If I can make an exception on a paycheck, that'd be one thing, but it'd be a one-off, one time only. I just don't get involved financially with people. There is a place where I probably wouldn't cross the line, and the graceful way out of that is to offer a resource.
Like a therapist, or support them.
Exactly. Yeah. Something that is not me.
Right.
I would never advise, if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm feeling really depressed, blah, blah, I'm not going to say, oh, just get over it or just do this. It's like, hey, have you consulted, a medical professional?
A real professional level,
or someone that's at a professional level. And that would be my encouragement to them. It's not, here's a book. Go read this.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting where you're talking about this. Some of the themes that continue to emerge in this season of the Clearing Obstacles podcast, which focuses almost exclusively on leadership. Regarding that subject, some of those themes have been strong character in the leader, empathy, what else? Decisiveness, vision, but especially self-awareness among many, many others. Anybody who's listened to the 12 other episodes from at this point for this season. I was wondering if you can share a little bit about how your leadership style has evolved over the years. How did you show up 25 years ago versus how you show up today?
Remarkably different.
How so and why?
I think going back to that start of the business, if you will, was purely out of survival. We're going back to Maslow here.
Yeah. The hierarchy of needs.
Food and shelter, and that's what we're after here. And then it was, well, if I just work hard enough, I can make it. Right. And I could will myself. And then it was, well,
I'll muscle my way through it.
Absolutely. No other way to do it.
Yeah.
That's natural.
Yeah.
For me.
And to be fair, I think at a particular stage, that is kind of what it takes.
Well, you probably wouldn't get in that position without that.
True.
Right. So anybody who steps off the cliff and says, I'm going to do this, is probably highly committed to that prospect.
Yeah.
And as my dear friend says, you'll work 12 hours for yourself so you don't have to work 8 hours for somebody else. I'm like, yeah.
I'm paddling that boat with you, brother.
Doesn't everybody think that way?
Right? Doesn't everybody think that way?
That's my arrogance, was like, oh, not everybody thinks that way. So for me, it was that sheer will, bootstrap, we're going to make this happen.
Yeah.
And then you hire somebody. And I think that they're going to think like me.
Yeah.
And if they don't, I'll make them. Well, that doesn't always work.
Yeah. This is you 25 years ago.
25 years ago, yeah. And so then it was through my first mentor was here in the Rogue Community College, a 12-month class called Small Business Management. And the instructor, who is today a super dear friend of mine, was my first mentor. And that very first day, he played this VHS, almost black and white video of Michael Gerber sitting on a bar stool with this straw hat, these Coke bottle glasses. And he looks right at me and says, you don't own a business, you own a job. And it was that moment I had to sit back and say, what is he talking about? And then so began a long journey of self-examination and, as you said, awareness. Like how did I get here? What feels successful, but on the outside, or looks successful on the outside, feels so bad on the inside.
Yeah. What was so confronting about that message?
Well, it was true.
Yeah. If it wasn't true, it probably wouldn't have been confronting.
No, he just described me perfectly. It's like he just looked right through that television and described it perfectly, which was I was wearing all the hats. And the only answer was move faster.
Yeah. Move faster, work harder.
Do more. And
more grit, more grind, more hustle.
Yeah. And that's the treadmill. And it just goes faster and faster and faster. But like I said, on the outside, the house, the cars, the boats, the airplane, blah, blah, blah. But on the inside, it was a trap.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was a trap. And so So first I had to change the way that I viewed myself. And then I viewed the way I saw people. And the long story short, we could dive into it or if you choose to, but is instead of being results oriented, is becoming process oriented and really drilling down on the systems that make the business work and not demanding of the people, but trust the systems. And a lot of that is people development. And that took me to a place called Wing Seminars, which is a personal development organization, nonprofit. And that in turn opened me back up to professional business coaching, which Tom of 24 years ago never would have even considered it. But through these baby steps, really brought me back to what's the saying? You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from there was the vastness and the richness of what I didn't know. If you look at it from a fear-based standpoint, I don't know this, therefore I don't want to go there. Or you look at it from a place of curiosity, which is, well, tell me about that.
Right.
How can I learn more about that without being threatened?
You sort of have to put the ego aside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
not sort of, completely.
Completely. Because to say I don't know with an ego is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
To say, what's that all about? Isn't quite so terrifying. It's the same place.
I want our listeners to take note of just that subtle shift in the language of that. I don't know versus what's that about. I don't know is a declarative statement that does directly reflect your ego, or could very almost definitely, versus the curiosity of, and that's a theme that's emerged too in this season about leadership is an insatiable curiosity, is to say, well, what's that about? What's that about?
What's that about?
Yeah.
And that opens up the possibilities. And you could be right of whatever you thought, but you're at least poked around.
Yeah. And now you can do something. Now you can confront it.
I think more often than not, there's something to be learned there.
Yeah. I would agree.
But even if not, even if you just came back with the validation that, hey, what I'm doing is working and I'm going to stick with it. How good does that feel?
Yeah. And devil's advocate, if you're genuinely curious about what you don't know and the opportunity that's in front of you, how cool is that? Like, to recognize that in your own humility, the potential that exists in you to level up in whatever way or whatever context that is.
Well, I think that comes with maturity, I guess would be maybe the word I'd be looking at is Tom at 35 didn't necessarily have the maturity that Tom at 61 has.
Yeah.
And
thank God.
Thank God. And the whole spectrum that comes along the way. And so I think as in the sense of what is leadership about, it's about evolving. It's about evolving from what I am or how I do what I do to what the possibilities are, and then putting those in motion. And for me, there's a sweet spot in there where things accelerate very rapidly. And here I am I'd like to think I'm at the tail end of my career, maybe not, but it's, in terms of the grinding, I hope it's coming to a close, is now the velocity is not moving as fast because I feel confident in the way that we operate. Now, is the outside world going to influence that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's stoicism right there.
Yeah.
But I can control what I can control.
Yeah.
And that's not moving as fast as it used to be, which to me is good.
Yeah.
That means I'm confident in how we're approaching things.
Yeah. Do you find, you mentioned you're kind of at the sunset, if you will, of the professional grind. I know you well enough to know, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I know enough about you that you're not going to end up on a rocking chair for any significant length of time, just because of how I know you anyway. I could be wrong there, but if I had $1, I think I'd probably borrow a second one and bet them both. You're not going to end up on a rocking chair.
No, probably not.
No. Do you find that comforting or mildly terrifying?
A year or two ago, it was unfathomable. Like just the thought of it was like, yeah, no, probably not.
Yeah.
And then my wife said something to me really important. We're 61 years old. We've been married 35 years. We got a beautiful daughter that's 33 and married and presumably on her way to having a family of her own. And Kim said to me recently, about 6 months ago, we need to travel while we can.
Mm.
And for me, it's always, we'll do that when we get there. I'll do that when the time's right. But when again, stepping outside of what my thought is and putting her thought first is that's where I need to honor.
Mm-hmm.
I need to honor her wishes in that regard on me.
Say more to that. I'm not totally tracking either.
This the sunset, the winding down, the getting off the treadmill. I mean, I wouldn't say I've been on a treadmill.
Yeah,
I'm on it for fun.
Okay. Yeah.
I like, it's not the pace, it's the challenge.
Yeah.
So I like the challenge. I like the growing the business. I like pulling the levers and saying what if.
Yeah.
But that doesn't serve my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you tired? Are you at all fatigued from the pulling the levers and see what they do?
I'd say maybe it's lost some of its fun in a way, at least at Retail Profit Systems. So you mentioned at the introduction, we have another company that my son-in-law and I are involved with called Big Rig Glass. And it's an old company, but it's a budding company. And like we've been doing this for 6 or 7 years and we're trying to find that
20-year-old startup. Yeah,
20-year-old startup. 20-year overnight success. Now we're into it for about 7 years and we're having really good success in terms of growing the business, a top line revenue. But it's more fun to dabble in that than it is on what I do know. And so the business isn't dependent on me. Right. So it's actually I'm more of a consultant. So that's more fun. So if I'm pulling levers, that's where I want to pull the lever.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And, and that's just to help somebody else reach their goal and their potential. And that company has the demographic employees of of that company is a much younger 22 to 30-year-old employee.
Right.
It's male dominated. Because we're technicians, we're out slinging
under
glass.
Of semi trucks.
Yeah. We're replacing windshields and fixing glass and broken windows and heavy equipment. Blah blah blah. That's the demographic of what we got. So that fits almost perfectly in the people development because I can relate to that. Yeah, and I can speak to that. And so when we're talking about serving up opportunities and really recognizing potential. It's super fun.
I'll bet.
Yeah. And I think a huge missing component of this, kind of going back to Maslow for a second, is, if people don't have their basic needs met, food, shelter, clothing,
safety,
which in our Western culture is defined by money, is that
it's the conduit at the very least. Yeah.
I'm not saying the money is a guarantee of success, but I tell you what, it's almost a guarantee to unhappiness, in today's world. So part of that is also financial counseling on what are 401ks, how to establish budgets. I mean, trying to really plan down the road because 20, 30 years goes by pretty fast if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned earlier about leadership, about vision.
Yeah.
That's straight out of my E-Myth coaching, which is what is the vision that you want. Not for your company. Your company is here to serve you. Or why else would you do it?
Right.
Nobody signs up to be a slave to a company. The company is there to serve me, the owner, but it could also serve everybody else along the way.
Yeah.
I think that's where people kind of get wrapped around the axle a little bit is if it's there to serve the owner, then everyone's a slave to the owner. No, we could all do this together.
Right. This is not mutually exclusive benefit for the owner and everybody else is a pawn in their chess game.
Exactly. And that goes back to the box. If I create a box that you own, and then that box can get bigger and bigger and bigger and your responsibilities, and then compensation is directly related to responsibility.
Yeah.
In my companies anyway.
Yeah.
And so the more that you show that you have a willingness and capability to take on responsibility, I'm gladly pay you more money.
Right.
And then that feeds to your personal financial success. And we talk about, okay, now you got a big raise. Inevitably, I've given many, many raises in my 25 years. If I give a big raise, inevitably that person shows up with a new car.
Uh-huh.
And I warn them, I'm going to give you a big raise. Don't buy a new car.
Don't go buy a new car. Keep driving that thing that you're driving.
For
It's
at least
paid
a
off.
little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then take that extra money, put it in your retirement. Take some time, to evaluate what's the next thing for you.
Yeah.
Have a vision of what you want to do with that. And again, that's one little life's lesson.
Yeah.
But if it's done right, then the next one, the next one, and the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way you talk about, and the way I've firsthand witnessed your relationship and care for your employees over the years, it's a natural transition that you kind of moved into being a part owner of Big Rig Glass, and you brought with you, like, you could draw a straight line to the values and the approach and the leadership skills that you had with your employees to, in some regard, your business partners and definitely the employees there. There's a level of care and support and bringing out the best in them that is a priority for you. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, from what I've observed, you're, for lack of a better term, insisting that they're doing that with everybody on the team as well.
Without a doubt. I mean, a simple example is T-shirts. T-shirts that say Big Rig Glass on them. Mm-hmm. Care and respect. If you want people to show up and represent your company, then give them something to be representative of. Mm-hmm.
Let them wear the damn brand.
Wear the brand. Be the brand. Talk about the brand.
Yeah.
What is the brand? And at Big Rig Glass, through some meetings, we came up with our own internal tag. It's care and respect. Care for the customer, respect for their vehicles, care for our employees, mm-hmm. respect for their time, mm-hmm. Their again, time value of money. Mm-hmm. All of those things are really critical. And that is a direct line. Everything that I learned at RPS, mm-hmm. post-coaching, post-engagement mm-hmm. to Big Rig Glass was an accelerated way of doing it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it again, that's probably why it's more exciting to me to want to work over there than it is at Retail Profit Systems. Not that Retail Profit Systems isn't exciting.
Yeah.
I guess my guys are more mature and we don't have a lot of turnover. So therefore everyone's kind of in their groove and doing their thing and appears to be very happy. And
yeah.
And so from an entrepreneur standpoint, you're going to want to go where your interests and energies are going to be rewarded.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the risk of sounding a little ingratiating, you architected it that way, right? I mean, that was part of, that was your intention all along to some degree, was to let it, to empower your people to own their space, own their role, and you are there to support them and give them whatever resources they needed so that they were able to do that. Now, when they didn't, did you find yourself having to sort of step in and play a temporary micromanager?
The old Tom would have been easy to micromanage people, but people hate being micromanaged.
Yeah.
And so what we really is, we have a lot of meetings that talk specifically about that, like, and how to avoid that, mm-hmm. which is pretty simply defining what needs to be done and when's it going to be done. So rather than micromanaging, now we use timelines and workflow and, again, processes mm-hmm. so that everybody's tracking the same way so it doesn't feel like micromanagement. Right. I had one employee in particular that we went kind of round and round on this subject, and one of the books that was super successful in kind of changing that was the Checklist Manifesto.
Yeah, great.
Okay. So being a pilot, a checklist makes perfect sense
Absolutely.
To me, right?
Nobody's above a checklist. Nobody. I just had this conversation with a client literally 30 minutes ago before we start recording. Yeah.
So I handed him the book of the Checklist Manifesto, and I said, we're gonna, we have weekly meetings for an hour long, and I said, I'm going to cut you loose 30 minutes and you're going to read this book on my time. And then we're going to discuss it. And at the end of that, he kind of came back with a new way of thinking, which is, oh, you're not up my ass because you're micromanaging me.
Right.
You just want me to check these boxes. And I mean that in a good way, not a banker way, but in a, but in a way that says,
this is the important stuff.
This is the important stuff. And what we finally keyed on, which is this: as long as all those boxes get checked, you actually have more freedom inside that space than me being a micromanager.
Right.
So it was kind of a moment of, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
You're actually trying to turn me loose to be creative in my own way, as long as these needs get met.
Yeah.
And different circumstances call for different approaches. And so again, pivot as you need to, but these are the important things. And as long as they all get done.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I maybe even said this on a previous episode, so forgive me, listeners, if you've heard this one before. I like sort of the little bumper sticker, if you will, when we're couching a checklist with an employee to basically say, or some version of accountability. Accountability can always land with an employee in a way that feels confronting or feels micromanagey or whatever. And I like to give them the two-liner here, whatever it is, that I'm giving you this so that I can feel comfortable with the management of the process and the results, so I don't have to be uncomfortable with the micromanagement of you, right? And that's sort of like, it sort of takes the zing out of the mechanism for accountability or again, like you said, and this is where it gets sticky, Tom, in my experience, is when you start talking about checklists, people immediately sort of feel like it's just about the process and it's not about what's underneath all of that, right? This checklist represents the important notes that we have to hit for the symphony to actually sound good. And if you're not hitting those notes, this is going to suck. So you hit these notes, I'm out of your way, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the key right there, is that the freedom lies for you in getting the job done in how you see fit.
Yeah.
Obviously we
hit these fundamentals.
We want to be consistent in the fundamentals and the things that we do, and we want those done, in a particular way. But at the same time, every situation's different. And that just, again, gives them the flexibility. If you frame it as flexibility, not rigidity, it is received dramatically different.
Yeah. Yeah. I jokingly, but somewhat soberly reflect that all of us, I don't care what age we are, we're all kind of little kids in a way, in this regard. And let me give some context, that we all want to know how big our playground is. You probably had this conversation a decade ago.
Yeah, probably.
We want to know how big the playground is. As long as I know where the fence is, I'm free to play. I'm at liberty to go and have fun in what I'm doing. I'm able to make joy out of this experience. But if I don't know where the fence is, that's going to be this kind of lingering shadow over everything that I'm doing, because I'm not sure what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. So you give me a structure, you show me where the fence is, and then say, Dan, everything inside of here, have fun. Riff on it, let's like a jazz musician. If you know the scales, just go have fun. But if you don't know the scales, you're going to fuck this thing up so bad that nobody's going to recognize what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. But just as long as we know what the size of the playground is, where the fence is, all of us just need that comfort. We have to know our boundaries. And, I'll die on that hill, man. I don't care if it's in your personal relationships, your professional relationships. What's in bounds and what's out of bounds? And once you know that, it feels like people at that point have the latitude, have the liberty, have the permission to play, to find joy in their work, to own it.
Yeah. And they respond positively.
Yeah.
A couple things along that vein. One of them is when you're a kid and your mom says you got 2 blocks because you can go to the neighbor's house because you can walk.
Yeah.
And then you get your first bicycle.
Not 6 blocks.
Yeah. And then you get your first car. In my case, my first car was a motorcycle. It was like, okay, my playground got bigger. Of course, you push the boundaries because that's what you do as a teenager. But the same thing is you're like, where's the edge? When it comes to employees, what I've discovered by through self-awareness and by taking a deep breath is that when my employee pushes the boundary of that playground, instead of being on them about what you did wrong, I put it in the sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I appreciate the fact that you had to make a decision and you made this decision. I applaud you for making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about this decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a conversation about what took you here, what took you there. And then that's my opportunity to say, well, did you consider this? Or did you consider that? Or did you consider when you did that, the impact it would have on X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
And then I can wrap it up with, hey, again, I applaud you for making a decision. Next time I'd like you to do this or consult this or talk to so-and-so or whatever.
Yeah.
I want them to be independent. I want them to make decisions. I want them. And when they do, and they make the right one, I give them nothing but applause.
Yeah.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Because you give them a little bit and then they think everything outside the playground is fair game. And so that's that give and take you have to have. But, if you're going to hire people and you're going to trust them in a small company with a significant amount of responsibility, you have to be willing to take the risk that it's not always going to play out.
Yeah. I'm taking an intermission. I'm going to get us another beer. So when you're giving that latitude, the sound of it, when you're given that latitude and it backfires, what's an effective way to course correct for those that, because it's an imperfect line. It's usually pretty fuzzy for everybody.
Well, I take accountability for whatever that is.
How so? Why?
Well, I mean, because in one way or another, I didn't give permission, and I didn't necessarily abdicate, but I delegated with risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my risk to delegate. And I have to look at it that the growth that comes from that decision, if it doesn't repeat itself, will serve itself many, many times over. So even if something goes sideways or not less than perfect, the place didn't burn down, we're still in business, maybe pissed off a customer, we'll make it right.
Yeah.
Man, we learned something.
Right.
So there is no error, there is no mistake. It's a learning decision. Right. And I have to take responsibility for that. So that's where the old Tom would have reacted probably a little more emotionally, where the new Tom can act a little more rationally in the thought of going through that.
The way you're talking about this, it compels me to sort of debunk the idea that I think has been oversimplified over the years, that if you have the right systems in place and your business can by and large run independent of you, that your vacancy as the leader is okay. And I have some very strong opinions about that. I'm curious about what yours are.
I think unless you're in the AI world, that doesn't exist.
So we're dealing with human beings.
We're dealing with human beings here. And so even the best employees have bad days. And even the best of owners have bad days.
God knows.
And so accountability and vulnerability and trust, those all factor into those things. And so it happened 2 days ago. I walked into my guys and I said, hey, this thing has happened. And I was a little edgy yesterday, and one of my employees laughed at me and goes, oh, that explains it. So yeah, there's vulnerability and understanding that we don't always act as we wish we would. Right?
True. All of us.
Yeah. And employees too. It's going to the 4 agreements. One of them is always try your best.
Yeah.
And I guess if that was one of the cornerstones of RPS, it is always give me your best. And on one day, you might hit 9 out of 10. On another day, you may hit 400.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah.
But you're still going to be okay. And I think grace is one of those things that I have become very familiar with, both for myself, for my learning curve and for my employees.
How do you define grace? It's my favorite word probably this year because it just resonates with me so much in my own journey as well as working with clients. What does grace mean to you?
I think someone's once described it to me as something you don't deserve. And mercy is not getting what you do deserve. And so...
I'll be ruminating on that for a minute. Yeah.
Grace is forgiveness. Yes, we screwed up, or yes, somebody screwed up. Yes, maybe you deserve a tongue lashing, but hey, what did we learn from it? And you move on. Mercy is not getting what you do deserve. Maybe you need that tongue lashing, but you know what? I'm going to spare you from it. Right? And that's where humanity comes into leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we aren't checking boxes of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where there's always a part of human nature at work here. And whether that's whatever's going on at home or personal ego or fear of repercussions in terms of salary or being demoted or not getting the bonus that you're counting on, whatever it might be. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that run into...
Yeah, you're talking about people's livelihoods and their egos and their...
Yeah. And so to me, the non-negotiables are integrity in the sense of stealing or being dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
I would also put not being forthcoming in what is going on in your life that might affect me. So what I mean by that is if I have to fire an employee and they don't see it coming, shame on me. If they quit without me seeing it coming, shame on them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the integrity to come to me and tell me that they were either unhappy or pursuing another opportunity because of X, Y, and Z. I may have that same opportunity. They just never asked. Right? So I think there's responsibility for both parties.
Yeah, you bet. It takes two to tango there for sure. I got to circle back to the question that I asked you about is, again, that old bumper sticker, the system is the solution. And to some degree, the vacancy of a leader is almost, with some people I've encountered, the vacancy of a leader is justified or is acceptable. And my question is that realistic or even possible?
I would think that someone has to be at the helm of the ship. And if that vision can be replaced, whether it be a CEO or COO or quote man, small companies don't have C-suites, right?
No.
But we got managers. Then that would be one thing. But I think as the leader of the company that everybody needs to know where we stand. And I am pretty transparent in that realm. Like I tell people what our goals are for the year. And one of the things that I do every December is I sit down and I encourage people, write out your goals. I've been doing it for
personal or professional?
Both.
Okay.
I've been doing it for 20 plus years and it's magic. It's magic. If you put it on paper and you fold it up and you put it in an envelope, and on New Year's Day, when you're watching the Rose Bowl and you pull that piece of paper out and you got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that you wanted to do, you more than not, most of them will get accomplished. It's that power of intention. When you publicize what that is, you've set your power of intention into play. Otherwise, if it's in your head, it's a dream.
You're right.
And you're not accountable because you never shared it with anybody.
Never shared it.
So in the business context, we sit down and we say, what is it you want to accomplish in the next 12 months? Could be a salary, it could be a bonus, could be a position, it could be a project, it could be, hopefully there's 3 or 4 or 5 things on there that you want to get done. Yeah. The personal ones, those are voluntary, but I highly encourage you to do them. And if you want to share them with me, I'm happy to look at them. Right. But I encourage you to share them with somebody. Yeah. But just the power of putting it on paper moves the needle a tremendous amount. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree in my experience. And I've worked with hundreds of clients who I can point to dozens of case studies where, yeah, and it goes beyond the, woo-woo manifestation kinds of things. I think that gets a pass in the real world and the pragmatic reality that, write your dreams on paper and it'll happen, but writing them, being accountable to them, committing to them, and acknowledging that that is where your intention is, that's what you want. There's a tremendous power in that, whether it's a business or the personal context.
Well, I think what it says, there's that saying, show me your checkbook and I'll tell you what's important to you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Show me your calendar,
I think,
and I'll tell you what's important to you.
Yeah.
What's important to you? Oh, my kids. How come you play golf every Saturday and miss your soccer games?
Yeah.
I think that's what that does, is it makes you sit for a moment with yourself. If you do it, and that's the whole thing. You could choose to do it, you could choose not to do it. I don't make my employees do it. I encourage them to do it. But if you sit with yourself and you define what is important to you and you act on it, you're in alignment with your values, your passions, your purpose.
Integrity.
Yeah, and your integrity. If you write it down and you don't do it, that's for you to sort out.
Yeah.
But at least I helped you figure out what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to that, values, passions, purposes, or principles, passions, purpose, whatever you want to call them, those are the definitions that I think that help people figure out what's in their heart.
Yeah. And you've done that over the years. I think you said 20 years ago, you encouraged your people to share those with you if they were willing.
Well, it's directly out of the E-Myth curriculum that I had, and it is directly out of the Wings personal development that we did, and it's directly out of the Unbeatable Mind community that I'm involved with.
Mm-hmm. Say a little bit about the Unbeatable Mind community that I know you've past, 6 years or so? I started reading a book in 2019. Okay.
It was called The Way of the SEAL by Mark Devine. It's a book on leadership. Mm-hmm. And Mark Devine was a Navy SEAL and a commander. And I thought it was a super curious book and good. Mm-hmm. And I got a couple of buddies who were on the team, so it kind of related to them in a way. And then he referenced a book called Unbeatable Mind. And in that book, he referenced an event called The Crucible, which is a physical event.
Yeah.
And I said to my son-in-law, do you want to go do this thing with me? And the CrossFit guys call it Kokoro. It's an ass beater is what it is. So he said, yeah. So I was committed, right?
Yeah.
So once you put it on paper, you're committed. At least I am. And then COVID hit.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so we postponed our March of 2020 event. It's down in Temecula, California.
Yeah.
It comes at a 6-hour, a 12-hour, a 24-hour, a 50-hour event. And you're on the move the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, we got a break.
Describe what some of that is, because the devil's in the details here. I mean, the ugly smoke and sulfur smelling devil is in these details.
Well, it's based on Navy SEAL Hell Week.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a lot of physical activity. It's running and push-ups and rolling around in the dirt and lifting logs over your head. And it is a challenge. It is a physical challenge, but it's not the physicality. It's the desire to not quit. And
Mm-hmm.
what makes you decide to quit or not quit is an individual choice. And that was my takeaway. At 58 years old, I was the fourth oldest guy to start. And I was the second oldest guy to finish.
I love that dichotomy.
So I was happy with my performance, but I still ruminated on for weeks and weeks after the fact that we were, and I say we because my son-in-law Adam went, and it was because he's part of the business. It was very much a team building.
You're being very humble about this. What was some of the shit they put you through? Because I know it was grueling.
It was grueling. I probably ran that. In that 12-hour span, I probably did 700 push-ups, 300 pull-ups. I ran 6 or 7 miles, carried a stretcher with about 300 pounds on it for about an hour and a half. And then the grand finale, we did the classic overhead log.
It's a big log. Yeah.
The big log. Yeah. Eight guys on a log. And we were by size, and I'm not a big guy. So I was the short crew, and we held that thing over our head for about an hour. It was a grind.
When you relayed this experience to me a couple of years ago after you had done it, that log over the head thing, I'm sure there's a much more technical term that they apply to that. That's the one that sticks out to me the most. What was it about that that stuck with you? What was the takeaway from that log over the head exercise? And maybe describe a little more what that was.
Yeah. So you got 8 human beings, because there were 7 guys and 1 girl in our log. And clearly she wasn't as physically strong after 12 hours of this day, but we're a team. And the magic of that particular event was, if one person fails, everybody fails.
That
you got a 300-pound log that's coming down, someone's going to get hurt. And we managed to hold that thing up. And when I say for an hour, we did 4 rotations at about 15-minute piece. And we got, maybe a couple minutes break in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was literally hanging onto a log for pretty close to an hour. And in a particular story, I was under the log, and one of the studs in our group, and my name's on the back of my t-shirt. He goes, "Pepple, how you doing?" I go, "Man, I'm struggling." And he goes, "Hey, I got you, brother." And he comes up behind me and he takes the pressure off. He says, "But keep your hands on the log. Don't give up. Don't give up." So I kept my hands on the log, and we made it through that rotation, put it down. I was like, "Okay, we made it." 2 minutes later, "Hey, pick the log back up." So here we go again.
I hate you right now.
So they shuffled us around, and now the one girl that was in our group is in front of me. And we're picking the log up, and we're up and down and squatting and doing stuff with it.
Yeah, because you're not just holding it, you're doing other shit.
Yeah, you're doing squats, you're moving it from one shoulder to the other shoulder, you put it down, you pick it up. I mean, this goes on for quite a while. And she was struggling, and I didn't even say anything. I just snuggled up, put my hands next to hers, locked my elbows out.
She knew you got her.
And I held that log up.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, we put the log down, and they secured us. And she goes, "What does that mean?" I go, "I mean, we're done." It's, and that was a high moment of lots of high fives and hugs.
I bet.
But it's getting eyes off yourself with this whole experience. And I think being a business owner, as a steward of a community, whether it be the community we live in, or the community I work with, or the community you play with, you have to be a steward of the community. You have to look out for other people.
Dude, I'm sorry. Will you say that louder for the people in the back? You do. You've got to look out for the people who you're in this boat with.
Without a doubt. And here's the irony. Here's the absolute God-honest truth. The more that I've taken the eyes off myself, the more I've taken the eyes off the result, the more I've focused on process, the business, and just the daily workout of the things that I know that are good for me, the richer my life gets.
Mm-hmm.
The relationships that I have, the people I'm with, the businesses operate themselves. I don't have to worry about that. It's getting eyes off of me. That's the secret.
And that's our trailer for this episode. It's already there. Look, when we started working together some time ago, it's probably over a decade ago. And we just did that for a few years. But at that time, I recall the presence that you had as the leader of Retail Profit Systems. You were on the backside of K2. You were on the backside of, like, your team in general were not necessarily your biggest fans, but they were coming around because you had shifted something about yourself. Say more about that. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? I remember part of it, you gave a nod to the Wings program, and I know that was really significant for you. The E-Myth coaching was, and some of the people that you were working with at the time. And there was I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but there was a transformation for you that happened. And I remember coming in to do some work with you and your team, and everybody, like, their head turning often about, like, the fuck was that guy? Like, that's that Tom said that? Like the Tom I know? Like Tom, like Tom Pepple. Like, like he did that? He said that? There was this transformation. What gave you and I know I'm venturing into the hyperbole here, but what gave you the courage to make the shift to be more Because I do know this. I could put a name to it. You are more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You are more honest.
Mm-hmm.
You are more in integrity with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You were more empathetic to everybody on your team,
Mm-hmm.
and they all felt it at a very deep level. It wasn't just simple singular actions that happened, but it was an immersive experience for them. What allowed you the courage to lean into that? Because I can tell you, I can guarantee that there are listeners who are like, yeah, maybe that worked for him, but what, fill in the blank.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everything you said is absolutely true. Vulnerability, the way I spoke to people, empathy, all of those things are absolutely true. And I think if I were to backtrack that, I would call it acceptance
Of?
myself. Knowing that I am a lovable, capable, and whole person. It's not based upon the outward success. God, I hate that word when people say successful or success. Because you could, on the outside, you could look like you got it all, and on the inside be totally miserable, because I've been there. I think more importantly, it was the acceptance of who I am with all my flaws, regardless of whatever's happened in the past, the power of now, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So what? What are you going to do about it?
From this point forward.
From this point forward, the past doesn't matter. I'm not living there.
Mm-hmm.
I like to visit it from time to time. It's good for perspective.
It's very informative.
Yeah. Mostly it'll show how far I've come.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of the past, but I don't want to live there.
Yeah.
So today it's about staying present, being in the moment, all of the things you just said, and then forging a trail forward, a vision, and taking me there. And that includes a lot of the people with me and beside me. I used to say behind me, but now I'm more like, come on, let's go.
That to me reflects a shift in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's awareness. Those are the two key words for me: acceptance and awareness.
I'd go back to that grace. Acceptance, to me, there's a real parallel there, and I'm sure the pedantic part of me wants to like dig into that and what's the difference there. But grace offers you the forgiveness of your past.
Yeah, and I think ambitions can blind one to the damage. It's easy
That you're doing.
Yeah. Well, let's use a boat analogy. You're hauling ass on your boat, man. You're getting where you want to go, and then you look in the wake and you look at all the carnage you left behind.
Right.
Why? For me. Now, when you say, "Hey, all of those, get in the boat. Yeah, let's go," and to me, that's the shift. And the reality is, not everybody's going to get in the boat, but everybody's got an opportunity to get in the boat.
True,
because I invited them. And when people look at and say, well, that works for you, but it won't work for me, I'm going to tell you, man, it'll work for anybody. I feel like I'm living proof.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think grace, acceptance, vision. We could dive into integrity. What does integrity really mean?
Right.
To me, it means all the truth all the time.
Ooh, yeah.
All the truth all the time. So integrity in my world, because the way I was raised was, you show up on time, you say you're going to do something, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
But that's not all the truth all the time. I'm going to omit the stuff I don't want you to know.
It's much more comfortable there.
Yeah. I'll just put on a pretty face and nobody will see what's under there. But that's when people miss a chance to know you.
All the truth all the time. Dude, I'll tell you seriously, and I say this with plenty of experiences. Look, I craft values statements with more business owners than we can shake a stick at. And integrity invariably ends up on almost every company values list. As, in my opinion, it should.
As it should.
It's huge.
But what does it mean?
But what's incredible about that is, in my experience, is the vast number of definitions that people have for integrity. But all the truth all the time, I really dig that one. That's again, it's one of the most common, and it's also, I could say, everybody has defined it differently in my experience over the years.
Yeah. It's easy to, like I said, to paint it as telling the truth and not cheating anybody and showing up on
That's
time.
fair.
and
Okay, that's good.
But that's not all there is to it, And then I think the other factor is do we have to take this so seriously? Can we just have some fun along the way? It's way more fun. And I think that was when you were talking about, the past of 10 years ago was I'm not really sure I knew how to have fun when something that was so serious and so valuable to me as the company. And I think most business owners can probably relate to this. I'm not responsible for me or my company. I'm responsible for the 15 guys that work for me and their significant others and their kids. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes along the way.
It's heavy, man.
Yeah, it can be. It doesn't mean we can't have fun along the way.
Right.
And I think that sometimes gets lost. That resentment of, you don't know what I'm doing for you. You don't understand the stress that I'm under. That's my shit, Dan.
Yeah.
When I share that with someone, then they have empathy for me and I can in turn have empathy for them. So
when you mutually share it, it's even stronger.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a quick story. So when I started my company 26 years ago, we had very little left over, very little. My daughter was about 7 years old. And she's too young to understand the sacrifices that we made as a family. And later on, I had, quote, success. Again, I hate that word. And I was sharing with my previous business coach some of what those early days were about. And he goes, have you ever shared that with anybody? And I said, no, not really. And so I told my daughter this story. So she's 15, 16 years old. And I said, do you remember when we used to go to the grocery store for ice cream cones? She said, oh, yeah, I used to love to go to the grocery store for ice cream cones. They were 25 cents.
Yeah.
And I go, we went to the grocery store because they were 25 cents.
Not to Baskin Robbins.
Not to Baskin Robbins, not to Dairy Queen. We went to the grocery store. And she said, oh. So it puts perspective in the world that she never knew of.
Right.
So I tell those stories to my employees when it's appropriate of the struggles that we had early on so that they have a sense of the path that we've been on as a company. That's vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not looking for accolade. I'm not looking for, oh, you're such a stud or a hero.
Right. You got to be judicious in how you're sharing those. Otherwise, it feels a little gratuitous or opportunistic.
Exactly. I'm not beating anybody with a stick here.
No.
But we're having honest.
There's some context here that would be important if I shared with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's integrity. That's vulnerability.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you to embrace that? What was, what's the expression? Nobody ever changes until the pain becomes so excruciating or the pleasure becomes so seductive that we actually move off of the center that we are, committed to. And you made a significant shift. And sadly, I wasn't there to see that, but I saw literally, I joined up with you in the wake of that. What do you think that was? Do you know?
Yeah, I do. It was the Wings seminars that I went to. The first one's is called Well-Being, and it's a model that expresses those four cornerstones of ownership, integrity, vulnerability, and spontaneity. And
all great leadership attributes.
Super powerful. And it's what you want from your people too. So if you model that behavior, you have to model ownership for people to want to show up. You have to model integrity for them to want to believe. You have to model spontaneity, which is do we have to take this so seriously all the time?
Yeah,
right? Let's our Christmas parties are notorious. So that was the one.
I read about them in the paper.
So that was the one event that really opened my eyes to what was possible. And it was the second seminar called Crossover that made it a reality. And that was defining my own agreement with myself, which I am. I am a trusting, connected man living in truth. Trusting as in relationships. I'm connected because I'm paying attention to the world around me. And I'm living the truth is the sense that if I see the world as not as it is, but as I want it to be, that difference is unhappiness. But if I see the world that I'm in as it is, I can choose something different. But if I simply only see the world as I wish it were,
You got a quiet resentment going on all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm powerless.
And powerless. That's,
I'm victim.
Mm.
If I only had that, if I only did this, if I only did that. But if I see the world as it is and who I am in this moment, now I'm a choice.
That all sounds compelling, but there's something that stands behind a person in that state and shoves them the fuck off the diving board, whether they wanted to go or not. Do you recall what the shove was?
I think it was huge regret
For the dude you'd been?
for the dude I'd been. And I think it was a huge sense of loss for the people that didn't know me who I truly was, but only saw me for the person that I portrayed
It's hard.
to be. So I came to terms with who I wasn't and chose to be who I am.
You came to terms with who you were not and chose to be who you actually
Yeah, I
were.
was an imposter. I was a poser.
You embraced some serious freaking integrity.
Yeah. All the truth all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked that question because it's important, because I can assure you there are people who might be listening to this who, again, would be a naysayer or a skeptic about that works for Tom. Great, good for him. But I think my truth is, my experience is, we all have these very just invaluable moments where we have the great fortune of having somebody behind us, and it could be something behind us that shoves us off that diving board. Says you're going because it's your time. Jump. You'll be okay.
Well, along that vein, was a moment of humility when I thought I had earned all that I had through grit and
There's an entitlement
and luck and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, when I really came to terms that my father, my coaches, my teachers, the people that I learned from all had influence on the person that I am today. And without exaggeration, and my wife of 35 years was hugely not my biggest fan, but the most loyal. We jokingly say, I said, hey, I'm going to move to Medford. We're going to start this company. She said, we're going to starve. That's what she said. But she got behind me and she trusted me. And then, so one last thing I'd like to add is that my definition of spirituality is, it's not religion. It's how connected am I to the people around me? Could be a stranger in a grocery store, could be the people that are the absolute closest to me. But if I'm paying attention to the people around me, then I'm connected spiritually. And I think that's been a huge guide.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the old Tom was pretty oblivious to what was going on with other people. And that connectivity comes through, practice of box breathing or through the practice of meditation, even if it's not like a formality.
Mm-hmm.
It's just getting eyes off of me. That's what connectivity is all about, is getting out of my own head and my own world and paying attention to what's going on around me. And that makes leadership so much easier when you're aware of what other people are going through. I could see it on their face where before I couldn't.
I love the way you put that, because it debunks the idea that leadership is power or position. Leadership is empowering, and maybe by virtue of position, because others are looking to, you're standing at the front of the boat, everything you need to get us there. And that awareness of other, which I want to augment that. I don't think one can have a healthy awareness of other without a healthy awareness of self.
Absolutely.
And to get out of your own way enough to recognize the needs of others, the passions of others, whatever might contribute to their wholeness and their well-being, and then say, yeah, I'm in, right? You're kind of co-creating, despite a role, if you will, as a leader, you're co-creating the best in them, and that rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah.
You've got...
Well, it's also amazing what you can learn from other people. It truly is. I think earlier we talked about the word acceptance. Another potential word for that would be surrender. You have to, I think, to surrender to receive grace, those two kind of go hand in hand.
They do.
Is to get out of your own way requires you to acknowledge that I don't have all the answers here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's quit pretending I do.
Dude, that's powerful. With that, Tom, I just want to thank you so much, bottom of my heart. Brother, I just love you so much, and I appreciate you taking some time to share your experiences and your wisdom with anybody who's listening, and with me. You continue, like I said at the top of the call, you continue to inspire and educate me and enrich me with your wisdom and the experiences that you have, and I vicariously live life through you at times, and I'm just so grateful to have you in my life.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Thanks for joining us. We at Best Self Coaching hope you got all that you came here for from today's episode, and if you want more like this, be sure to follow and subscribe to Clearing Obstacles on your favorite listening platform. You can also go to bestself.coach/podcast for more information. There you'll find more episodes and links to the content discussed today, as well as info on how you can get in touch if you're interested in clearing your own obstacles to become the kind of leader that you know your team is waiting for. Your business should serve your life, so let us help you get there from here, because nobody should do this on their own. Thanks again for listening. See you soon.